At least it is true that man has no control, even over his own will.
The Eclipse was the place of Berserk's world that we call Hell. Griffith's sacrifice could only take place in such a demonic setting, where agony is the ambience, blood is the color, and sexual dominance is the norm. All of these decorative parts are overlooked by the God-hand, which themselves embody the sins of humans, now nudging their newest member to commit atrocities. Griffith, forcing himself onto Casca in his new devilish form, was explicitly shown in several panels, one after the other, which puts a lot of emphasis on the scene. The viewer is probably heavily sympathizing with Guts at this point of the show and is rooting for the developing relationship between him and Casca. But then everything is halted by a deed that both disgusts the audience and infuriates it. The question that arises is, why? Why should a good leader and a friend do such a thing to such an extreme? What was the motive and the thought process behind it? Was it all destiny? If we go back into time, Griffith was building his own future by his very own hands. Nothing lifted him up. He did it all by himself. Albeit he transformed himself into a humanoid monster in the process. Sex was just a mean to an end, manipulation was a tactic, and humans were a tool. Love was possessive, and death was a stepping stone. Griffith was building his castle, but the future king, to be sitting on a throne, was to be an unstable sociopath. Life offered him such harshness from early on that he had to harden himself up and keep everything valuable very tightly to himself, such as his thoughts were only in his head and the Band of the Hawk under his rule. Keep in mind that this behavior is being reaffirmed since childhood. And then came Guts. He offered such simplicity in way of living, something Griffith himself did not have. It took little time for both of them to see value in each other. Those two loners found affinity between their two souls. However, the more time they strengthened their bond and trust with each other, the more Griffith's love towards Guts was cultivated. But as we know, Griffith's way of cherishing somebody is by possessing. Guts, on the other hand, respected Griffith so much that he wanted to be just like him and be able to call him a true friend. That's where the cogs of the Eclipse started turning, as Guts chose to leave the Band of the Hawk in order to find his own path. Griffith perceived that as treason, as the biggest stab in the back there could ever be. That development led him to plunge himself into depression, and it pushed him into terrible decisions. Him going to Princess Charlotte was a move to try and restore power and dominance over something that was forbidden and would help him forget Guts. Charlotte was a tool in this sexual interaction, as Griffith never really valued the coming together of bodies all that much, other than in terms of practical use. The princess was the forbidden fruit that Griffith bit from, similar to how Adam tasted the apple of Eden and was thereby expelled from heaven. Griffith in such a way lost all the good he had built: reputation, the Band of the Hawk, his stature, and later his body. But before we get into the torture and actions that lead to Griffith's deed, please consider liking the video and subscribing as not to miss content such as that here. To endure torture is something that puts the evil essence into a man's body. You are neither killed, nor are you truly alive. You are just barely existing if the torment was extreme enough. Griffith couldn't walk, speak, or move properly after being in the dungeons for a year, and that pain led him to have visions of the demonic help that would come his way. The strings of causality were moving towards the Eclipse ever more quickly. It is actually Guts' strong loyalty towards his friend Griffith that makes him rescue his leader. Again, here, Guts acting as a driving factor of events. Once, the bitter and resentful Griffith sees the face of the traitor for the first time, he tries to strangle him, though he's too weak to do it. Yet, then he softens up as he observes the grief on Guts' face, showing us that Griffith had his humanity intact. This broken man tried to smile and live that life that was now offered to him. But he was carried around by Pippin, cared for like a child and defended from enemies while his comrades were dying for his sake. It all drained the pride of the man and was heavy on his consciousness. The worst of all, his closest people, Guts and Casca, were moving forward without him, while he was disabled and infertile. Yet again, Griffith felt a great need to repossess power in his life. That is when he tried to enforce himself onto Casca in the wagon, but he was way too weak. And she just felt pity for him. Casca was neither angry nor embarrassed as she would be with the normal man. Griffith was not a man anymore. So then, as Griffith is having a nightmare about a normal life with Casca, where he cannot walk, he sees a vision of his dream and chases it, to then reach the egg of the king that was discarded by the torturer. That's how the life of the man named Griffith ended. He was too weak to eat or even have sex. He was powerless. And because he saw it all as destiny, and he weighed the cost that was already paid for his ambition up to this point, Griffith saw no point in holding back the sacrificial ritual of the Eclipse. The souls of his comrades were to be the nutrition for his egg that was about to hatch. Guts was slowly but surely defeated, terrified and maddened by the apostles, which made him vulnerable in the presence of a godly creature that was descending to fulfill his vengeance. Femto, the new identity of Griffith, stares down on the powerless Guts, and Casca was lowered so that he can proceed with the last blow. It all happened because of Guts, and that's why Femto's extreme vengeful hatred is enacted in such a way as to use Casca in front of her lover. Thus Femto achieves ultimate power and destroys every last bit of his humanity and his weak identity by being a part of the God Hand, but also taking revenge upon Guts and Casca. Griffith is back on his throne. Now there is a theory that Griffith wanted to taint Casca's baby so that he can be reborn through it in the material world, but that is assuming that he can see the strings of causality and the future, and also that the Skull Knight will save them both. Otherwise, Guts and Casca would both be dead and the theory falls apart. I hope that interpretation and analysis helps with the questions around Griffith's deed over Casca. Thank you for watching.